Welcome to Last Dawn Stories channel. In my previous life, on the day my sister and I were choosing our beast man partners, she picked the agile white tiger, while all that was left for me was a frail and feeble python on the verge of death. After marrying the python, I gave birth to its offspring within less than a year. The following year, the python unexpectedly succeeded in its tribulation and transformed into a golden dragon, and I naturally became the Dragon Queen. Enjoying the utmost respect from all under heaven, meanwhile, my sister's white tiger grew weaker by the day after marrying her, even fainting during the family succession competition, never to recover from that setback. In the end, I won the competition, and my sister, consumed by rage, not only poisoned my wine but also threw my child off a cliff. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day of choosing an Orcish mate, the moment I saw my sister rushing toward the little basilisk. I knew she had been reborn too, but what she didn't know was that being the Dragon Queen wasn't as easy as it seemed. To enhance their magical power, every woman in my family must choose her own orc husband on the day she comes of age. All the orcs are carefully selected by the servants before being presented, and since my sister and I come from the largest family in the Liang Kingdom, every orc is desperate to be chosen. My head throbbed as if pierced by needles when suddenly a clear voice rang out, "Father, Mother, I want this little python." I focused my gaze and saw my sister clinging tightly to the weak little python, throwing a tantrum and insisting that he be her husband. Evelyn, why don't you choose again? Look how majestic that white tiger is." My mother urged my sister. "Indeed, that snake looks rather sickly. It's more suitable for your younger sister, who even allowed this snake into the mansion," my father chimed in, even threatening to punish the servant who brought the snake in. I lowered my head and smiled wryly. As expected, even after being reborn, my parents still favored my sister, completely treating me as if I were invisible. "Father, Mother, since my sister likes the snake, let her have it. I'd like to choose the white tiger." Charles's eyes sparkled brightly when he heard I chose him, a faint blush creeping across his handsome face. Smack. Dad slapped me. "What on earth are you thinking? Are you determined to ruin your sister?" My father was so angry his mustache bristled, but my sister still wouldn't relent, crying and insisting on forming a contract with the snake. In the end, her parents couldn't resist her persistence and allowed her to form a contract with the snake, while I formed one with Charles. As my sister stepped out the door, she glanced back at me, her eyes filled with arrogance and provocation. "Little sister, you'd better be careful. The white tiger you chose might have some hidden ailment," my sister said, covering her mouth with a handkerchief as she gave me a charming smile. I knew exactly what she meant. In our previous life, the white tiger's health had steadily declined, and she actually believed it was an inherent flaw of the tiger. Watching her triumphant expression, I smiled faintly without saying a word. "Sister, your best days are yet to come. Only I know what that snake truly is. In my past life, people only knew that the snake successfully transcended its tribulation and transformed into a dragon, but they never understood the reason behind it, simply attributing it to the innate power of the snake's bloodline. Not at all. The spiritual power of the snake transforming into a dragon actually all comes from me. Our Green family is the foremost great family in the Liang Kingdom. In the previous dynasty, our clan produced a naturally born Furnace Saint physique, which could double a partner's cultivation power through dual cultivation. The heart's blood can even awaken bloodline power, greatly advancing one's cultivation. Apart from our illustrious family background, countless beastmen flocked to our sisters in hopes of forming a contract with the Furnace Saint physique. In my generation, I became the second sacred furnace body in my family, before dual cultivation with others. A sacred body is no different from an ordinary person. Only those who engage in dual cultivation with the sacred body can comprehend its profound mysteries. In my past life, after the snake discovered I was a sacred body, instead of properly nurturing me, it imprisoned me in a dungeon and forced me into daily dual cultivation. Moreover, it even sent people to extract a bowl of my heart's blood every week. I was wasting away under his torment, merely playing the role of his perfect husband in public to lay the foundation for his ascension as the Dragon King. Even when I was pregnant with the child of the snake, he showed no mercy, forcing me into dual cultivation against my will and even taking a bowl of my heart's blood on the day I gave birth. I only caught a glimpse of the child before the snake took it away, and I was plunged back into those days of endless darkness. By the day of the family head succession ceremony, I was already at the end of my rope. Even if my sister hadn't poisoned me, I wouldn't have lived much longer, but since my sister wants to experience my past life, why not let her enjoy it thoroughly? I brought Charles back to my courtyard. As the least favored daughter in the family, my residence was naturally the most remote. The only reason I could choose Charles this time was thanks to my status as the legitimate daughter. After all, the contract enforcer was watching. I couldn't afford to lose face as the main lineage. The courtyard may be remote, but I enjoy the peace and quiet it brings. From now on, you're mine, I said, patting Charles on the back. Charles stepped closer to me, and a scent unique to a young man wafted over. Charles was warm, and for some inexplicable reason, I felt completely at ease, but I still pushed him away. The memories of being imprisoned by the snake in my past life were still vivid, and I didn't want to reveal my identity as the sacred cauldron saint body so quickly. I gently pressed my finger against Charles's chest and said, Charles, although we've formed a contract, I'd like to get to know you better before we engage in dual cultivation. A pair of warm hands enveloped my icy fingertips, and warmth continuously flowed into my body. Charles's bright eyes stared fixedly at me as he nodded. Good. I don't like disobedient children. You can play by yourself for now. With that, I turned and went back to my room. Although I've stayed away from that venomous snake in this life, I still know nothing about the reason for Charles's physical decline in my previous life. The Tiger clan is naturally strong and robust. Even if my sister had abused him and forced him to train relentlessly, he shouldn't have become that frail. Charles outside the window was happily chasing butterflies in the garden. And I resolved that in this lifetime, I must save Charles. My husband, Elizabeth's, is undoubtedly the strongest. From the day I made my resolution, I rarely stayed in my own courtyard. I almost buried myself in the vast sea of scriptures in the library, desperately trying to find the reason for Charles's weakness back then. Hard work pays off. After a full month, I finally found the reason. Ancient texts record, the white tiger, before awakening, resembles ordinary tigers, yet prior to awakening, it requires boundless spiritual energy. Without sufficient spiritual nourishment, it will decline and perish. Charles is likely a descendant of the ancient divine white tiger, not just an ordinary white tiger. Before his bloodline awakens, he will need vast amounts of spiritual energy. If the supply is insufficient, he will wither and die. In the evening, I dragged my exhausted body back to my courtyard. Normally, Charles would have already returned to his room by this time. But today he was sitting at the door, hugging his knees with both hands, looking around as if waiting for someone. His two furry ears were out, drooping on top of his head. Charles, I called out to him, hearing my voice. His two ears perked up instantly, and his gaze turned toward me. Sis, you're finally back. The boy with beast ears suddenly burrowed into my embrace. What's wrong, sis? Since we made our contract a month ago, you leave early and return late every day. I barely get to see you. Don't you like me? The furry animal ears twitched slightly as the boy spoke with a hint of trembling in his voice, as if afraid of something. How could that be? I chuckled and ruffled Charles's hair. I just had some matters to attend to these past few days, which is why I've been neglecting you. Then can you spend more time with me from now on, sis? Charles gently pinched the corner of my clothes with his fingers, his gaze averted. Too shy to meet my eyes directly? Of course you can. I couldn't resist pinching Charles's soft, squishy cheeks. Charles looked utterly delighted, even reverting to his original form so I could pet him. As I stroked the soft, smooth tiger fur, my mind was preoccupied with how to gather enough spiritual energy for Charles before his next transformation. As I was lost in thought, my hand unknowingly slid somewhere, and I felt a small bump, which I even pinched a couple of times. Charles instantly transformed back into human form, his face turning as red as a boiled shrimp. What's going on? I looked at Charles in confusion. You pervert. Charles finished speaking and dashed back to his room in a flash. I looked at the tightly closed door and couldn't help but chuckle. What's the use of running? Won't you still have to share a bed with me tonight? Previously, when I returned, Charles was already asleep. This was the first time we'd be sharing a bed while both awake. The slender and handsome youth barely occupied the edge of the bed, leaving most of the space to me. The moment I sat on the bed, I heard the person beside me suddenly gasp, but when I turned to look, their eyes remained tightly shut. I said nothing, simply wrapping myself in the blanket and falling asleep. I was born with the sacred cauldron physique. Even without dual cultivation, just practicing near me greatly benefits one's cultivation. Charles's training seemed divinely aided, and over the past few months, his physique had visibly grown taller and broader day by day. As I approached him, I actually felt a sense of intimidation. Sis, Charles turned to me with a smile. Through these days of interaction, I had also come to realize that Charles was inherently kind-hearted. It's just a pity that in the previous life, my sister only knew how to harshly force him to cultivate, ultimately leading to a tragic downfall, counting the days. The time for Charles's awakening is drawing nearer. Since Charles is cultivating by my side in this life, his awakening will inevitably come earlier, and I should start making preparations for it. Charles, how about we go shopping together on the street today? All right, sister, whatever you want to do, I'll be with you. I shook my head and smiled. Silly tiger, we're going to buy things for you. These days, I've made quite a bit of money relying on my past life's memories. It's definitely enough to buy some rare treasures for Charles. The streets were bustling with people as I pulled Charles into the treasure pavilion. I purchased some spirit beads and spirit stones from the treasure pavilion at a high price. Seeing my lavish spending, the shopkeeper hurried over to personally attend to me. After settling the bill, as I was about to leave, the shopkeeper suddenly grabbed me and whispered in my ear, "Young lady, I can see you have extraordinary bearing. I have some other fine items here. Would you like to take a look?" "Oh, do tell. To be honest with you, miss, I have here a 1,000-year-old spirit ginseng. Consuming it can replenish a great amount of spiritual energy. Would you be interested?" Hearing this, I was genuinely intrigued. At this moment, I couldn't afford to pass up any opportunity to obtain spiritual energy. A jade pendant lay quietly on a piece of red silk, with faint wisps of white mist still curling above it. "Boss, this is indeed a fine piece of jade." Before I could finish speaking, a sharp voice interrupted me. "If it's such a fine piece, why don't you let me have it, little sister?" I looked up. It was Evelyn. Her face was caked with thick powder, and she had lost a lot of weight compared to before. Though her voice was loud, it was clearly a facade of strength. I chuckled to myself. It seemed Bruce, that snake, had already revealed his true colors. I just wonder what he'll do to me. His sister, who isn't a natural-born furnace. What happened? Another familiar voice chimed in. This time, it was Bruce. Hearing Bruce's voice, my sister visibly trembled, which further confirmed my suspicions. When Bruce arrived, though a flicker of panic flashed in my sister's eyes, her demeanor grew even more imposing. Our Bruce might soon undergo his tribulation. Do you know what a snake becomes after overcoming its tribulation? A dragon. Hurry up and hand over the jade to us. When Bruce transforms into a dragon, the entire Lee family will benefit from his glory. My sister's finger was practically pointing at my nose. "Get out of the way." Charles darted in front of me and forcefully pushed my sister's hand away. My sister staggered from the push, nearly falling to the ground, yet even then, Bruce didn't offer her a hand to steady herself. This is what it means to be completely discarded when you're no longer of any use. Sister's gaze turned venomous. Like a poisonous snake. I'm all too familiar with that look. It was exactly the same as when she poisoned my wine in my past life. In my past life, anything of value was imprisoned and coerced. "Oh sister, dear sister, what will become of you in this life?" I gently placed my hand on Charles's outstretched arm. Feeling his robust muscles beneath the thin fabric, this guy genuinely cares about me and wants to protect me. Since my sister likes it, how could I possibly compete with her for it? After saying that, I bowed and left the treasure pavilion with Charles. "Sister, I can defeat that snake. If you'd like, I can help you get the jade pendant back." Charles followed behind me, his gaze carrying a hint of murderous intent, as if he would immediately turn back to reclaim the jade pendant if I nodded. "No need. Why should we bother arguing with someone like her? Sister, I really can do it." I rubbed the head of the tiger that was bristling with anger and said mysteriously, "Don't worry, I've got it all planned out. Besides, we finally managed to go on a date together. Let's not waste our time on them." Hearing my answer, Charles quickly returned to his usual cheerful self, skipping along as he accompanied me shopping. As I strolled around, I pondered the events of the day. Ordinary snakes don't transform into dragons, nor do they require vast amounts of spiritual energy. Now Bruce also needs a vast amount of spiritual energy, even requiring Evelyn's assistance. Could it be that he has also been reborn? But it doesn't matter. In this life, without me, no matter what he does, he can never become a dragon. His current haste to absorb spiritual energy is nothing more than pulling up seedlings to help them grow. It will ultimately backfire on him. I estimate it will still be some time before Charles awakens, so gathering spiritual energy isn't urgent yet, but I still underestimated myself. That very night, Charles developed a high fever. I called the most renowned beastman physician in the city, but even he couldn't determine the cause, only saying the illness was peculiar. Evelyn came to my courtyard specifically to mock me. "Sister, I told you from the beginning that he was sick and would die sooner or later. Who told you not to listen?" I sneered. "Elder sister, Let's wait and see who will have the last laugh." Seeing that she couldn't out-argue me, Evelyn spat in my courtyard and left. I went inside to check on Charles. Charles's body was burning like a red-hot iron, his wheat-colored skin covered in beads of sweat that trickled down his sharply defined features. His eyes, usually bright as stars, were now bloodshot, beneath his tall, straight nose. His breathing was rapid and labored, each exhale carrying a scorching heat that seemed capable of igniting the surrounding air. "Sister, am I causing you trouble? I'll get better soon." Orcs have superior hearing compared to humans, so I knew he must have heard Evelyn's words. I placed a cool, damp cloth on his forehead and held his burning hands. "What are you talking about? Of course you'll get better." I wanted to wipe his body, but when I lifted the hem of his shirt, I noticed that Charles's firm abdomen had somehow developed a strange, eerie pattern. The demonic markings spread like dark spider silk, seemingly alive as they crept along the contours of his abdominal muscles. In that moment, I realized I had underestimated myself. I had thought the awakening day was still some time away, but it had arrived today. I recalled the records in ancient texts again. During the awakening period, the white tiger not only requires vast amounts of spiritual energy but also experiences intense desires. At this moment, Charles wasn't lying quietly in bed. He sat up, his furry head nuzzling against my shoulders and neck. His breathing grew increasingly heavy, and his hands began to wander restlessly, igniting sparks across my body. But he never crossed that final line. I've seen Charles's loyalty to me these days. It's time to give him some reward. Don't let the child suffocate. I turned my head and kissed Charles's burning lips. The next morning, Charles woke up refreshed and energetic, leaving me in bed with an aching back. Charles's body has grown stronger than before, and the thought of future days makes my vision darken. While I was resting in the courtyard, I suddenly heard a sharp, noisy commotion. "Little sister, don't shut me out. The servants in the mansion saw with their own eyes yesterday that you stole my spirit jade." Did I steal her spirit jade? It seems even after being reborn, I still can't place any hope in my dear sister. According to the Green family law, the thief must transfer all their spiritual power to the victim, plus receive 30 lashes. Bruce's voice echoed from outside the courtyard. "Apparently, he's here to back up my sister." I watched the two of them playing off each other, and a suspicion began to form in my mind. Bruce indeed needed spiritual power. A lot of it, otherwise he wouldn't have resorted to such clumsy methods to slander me and covet my cultivation. Just as I raised my head to retort, Charles suddenly rushed out in a flurry. "I've always been with Elizabeth, don't falsely accuse her." Evelyn looked at Charles with disdain, rolling her eyes dramatically. "You're her orc, of course you'd speak for her. I think you two are in cahoots, just waiting to transfer your spiritual energy to me and Bruce." I gently held Charles back and said to my dear sister with a bright smile, "Since my sister is so confident, why not invite everyone in the mansion to see whether I really stole her jade?" Upon hearing this, a flicker of surprise flashed in Charles's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure and tightly grasped my hand, as if offering his support. Evelyn's expression darkened momentarily at my words, but she soon forced herself to appear calm and snorted coldly, saying, "Fine. I'm not afraid of you, but even if everyone sees it, it won't change the fact that you stole my jade." All members of the Green family were summoned to the front hall, where my sister continued to accuse me of stealing her spiritual jade. I just stood by silently with a faint smile. Upon hearing this, my father angrily struck his cane on the ground and began scolding me harshly without even asking for the full story. "You unfilial child, you've been jealous of your sister since childhood, always snatching her things, and now you've even learned to steal." With an unchanged expression, I calmly replied, "Since my sister keeps insisting that I stole her jade, may I ask where the evidence is?" Wanting evidence is easy. Just have someone search your room and we'll surely find the stolen goods." "Then may I ask, sister, what you lost was indeed a spiritual jade containing spiritual energy, correct?" "Of course." "What, is my little sister scared now?" "If you confess your crime now, perhaps I can plead with father to spare you those 20 lashes. That's not it, I'm just afraid sister's memory might be failing with age, and you've mistaken what you lost. You..." Evelyn seemed about to lose her temper but restrained herself, directing the maids and matrons to search my courtyard. Before long, the head matron emerged holding a jade pendant, presenting it to Evelyn as if offering a treasure. "Look, young mistress, this is what this old servant found in the young mistress's room. Now that we have the evidence, what do you have to say for yourself, sister?" Evelyn put on a domineering air, looking down at me with arrogance. "But this isn't the jade my sister mentioned," I remarked calmly, taking a sip of tea. speaking of which, it's rather pitiful, in my past life, I was imprisoned, and the snake, fearing my death would prevent our dual cultivation, went to great lengths to gather rare treasures to keep me alive, so now, I only need a single glance to discern the authenticity of a jade pendant. That day, the shopkeeper did indeed produce a rare piece of warm jade, but to claim it contains spiritual energy would be an exaggeration. The jade was clearly just an ordinary piece of jade without any spiritual energy. The white smoke was merely the result of the shopkeeper placing vaporizing stone powder beneath it. Wretched creature. The evidence is right before your eyes, yet you still refuse to admit it. Guards, take this wretch away and drain all her spiritual energy to transfer it to Evelyn. Who dares? Charles emerged from behind me, positioning himself protectively in front of me. As he spoke, Charles's pupils instantly turned golden, emitting a strange glow. Golden eyes, the servant exclaimed in astonishment. That's the eye color only awakened ancient divine beasts can have. Could it be that the second young lady's beast husband is an awakened ancient divine beast? Seeing the golden eyes revealed by Charles, my dear sister's face immediately darkened. No wonder she's unhappy. In the previous life, the snake transformed into a golden dragon early, while the white tiger withered and died prematurely. Who would have thought that in this life, when she chose the snake instead, it was my white tiger that awakened ahead of time? Bruce also looked displeased. His gaze toward Charles filled with resentment. So what if your beast husband is an awakened divine beast? You stole from me, and both of you deserve to have all your spiritual power drained as compensation. Evelyn, seeing everyone's attention drawn away by Charles, quickly spoke up to bring the focus back to the jade. Sister, you jest. Take a closer look. What the nanny is holding is just an ordinary warm jade. Where is the spiritual jade you mentioned? The jade had been left untouched for so long that the vaporized stone powder on its surface had long since dissipated. Now, no matter who looked at it, it appeared to be just an ordinary piece of jade. I smiled and said, Sister, will you let me off the hook now? Elizabeth's face turned as ugly as if she had swallowed a fly, her expression flustered. No, this can't be. Impossible. No, I must have remembered wrong. What I lost was just an ordinary piece of warm jade. I had already anticipated she would change her story and smiled, saying, But I asked you once before the search, sister, and at that time you were absolutely certain you had lost a spirit jade. You, Evelyn wanted to say more, but with one glance from Bruce, she immediately fell silent, not daring to utter another word. I could tell at a glance. She must have been abused by Bruce, just like I was in my past life. In my previous life, I was born with the sacred cauldron physique, where normal dual cultivation alone could enhance my power, but Evelyn wasn't like that. Who knows what methods Bruce used to torment her? After all, that snake never had a shred of sincerity. If it was just Evelyn misremembering, then let's let it go this time, in front of everyone. My father couldn't openly favor my sister too much, so the matter was left unresolved. But only I knew that although Evelyn was the one playing the villain this time, it must have been Bruce pulling the strings behind the scenes. Her attempt to frame me had failed, and what awaited her upon returning would surely be cruel retaliation and endless torment. By the time we left the hall, the sky had darkened. Charles held my hand tightly, and feeling the warmth of his palm, I softly asked, What's wrong, sis? I feel so useless. Charles hung his head low. Silly. I flicked his forehead, feeling an inexplicable urge to cry. In my past life, no one cared about me. Since childhood, my parents always favored my sister. I thought marrying Bruce would make life easier, but what awaited me was endless humiliation and torment. Not even the lowest servants in the Dragon Palace gave me an ounce of respect, but fortunately, in this life, I met Charles. Sister, why are you crying? Seeing my tears, Charles anxiously leaned down, wanting to brush away the tears beneath my eyes with his fingers. Yet he hesitated, afraid that his increasingly rough hands from training might scratch my delicate skin. It's nothing. I just feel so lucky to have met you. I wiped my tears away with my own sleeve. Charles, you go in first. I need some time alone. I sat on the threshold, gazing at the twinkling stars in the sky, reminiscing about fragments of past and present lives. Suddenly, a voice shattered the tranquility. Elizabeth, the truth is I've always loved you. Bruce's voice came through as he stood there in fine robes, loosely tied with just a sash, revealing a glimpse of his chest. During the beast husband selection, I was secretly hoping you'd choose me. That's why I sneaked into the Lee residence. It was all for you. Bruce reached out his hand to me, stepping closer one deliberate step at a time. I laughed. Sure enough, Bruce has also been reborn. Did he come back to me only after realizing Evelyn isn't the innate spiritual furnace? If it were my past self, I might have been moved by his pitiful appearance, but unfortunately, in my previous life, I had already seen his true colors clearly. Stay away from me, I brushed off his approaching hand. Elizabeth, it's you I love. What's so great about that tiger? He's just after your special constitution. My feelings for you are genuine. Get lost. I left this cold remark behind as I turned and walked toward the courtyard. Elizabeth, Bruce was actually kneeling behind me, gripping my skirt tightly. Just as I was about to take action, a white figure flashed by like lightning, kicking Bruce 3 meters away. It was Charles. Elizabeth belongs to me alone. Who do you think you are, daring to touch her? Charles held me tightly in his arms, and I could smell the fresh scent of soap on him. Bruce lay on the ground, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, his slit pupils glaring at me with venom as he said, "Elizabeth, you'll regret this." Charles covered my eyes and said, "Sister, don't look at trash, look at me when we go back." I wrapped my arms around Charles's neck and let him carry me back into the house. Charles placed me on the bed, meticulously examining every inch of my body, then said with a pout, "Sister, you smell like someone else." I leaned close to his ear and whispered slowly, word by word, "Then, cover it up. I regret it. I truly regret it. I shouldn't have teased Charles yesterday. I really shouldn't have. I haven't been able to leave the bed for 3 days. Father's health is deteriorating day by day, making it difficult for him to handle family affairs. The next clan head succession ceremony is approaching soon. At that time, all members of the Green family from my generation will come to compete. The beast men will step onto the arena one by one to battle, and the wife of the victorious beast man will become the next clan head. I watched Charles practicing outside the house. I participated in last year's tournament and am aware of the strength of the beast men from that time. None of them could defeat Charles. If everything goes smoothly this year, the position of family head will undoubtedly fall into my hands. Ever since Bruce realized I would never change my mind, he completely disappeared without a trace, from the servants' gossip. I heard that Bruce is also on the verge of awakening, and now rumors are spreading everywhere that he will be the next Dragon King. As soon as I heard it, I knew Bruce must have resorted to some dark and twisted methods. In his previous life, Bruce and I, with my innate sacred cauldron physique, dual cultivated, yet he still found it insufficient. He sought countless other women to dual cultivate with, and after each session, the women would all drag their feet, their bodies as if drained of bones and sinews, utterly limp and powerless. But dark arts remain dark arts. Every time Bruce used this method for dual cultivation, his spiritual energy would become chaotic, and only by finding me could it be alleviated. News of his dragon transformation has spread so quickly, I wonder just how disordered the spiritual energy within him has become. The family head succession competition is about to begin, and Evelyn and I have been assigned to different groups. This means that my sister and I won't meet until the final match. Charles and I advanced effortlessly, as the other orcs were no match for the awakened Charles. Many even surrendered before the matches began. As for Bruce, his performance was highly inconsistent, sometimes winning with ease, other times barely scraping by. Every time Bruce narrowly won, the next day my sister's complexion would turn ghastly pale, her steps unsteady, even with wounds visible on her face. By the time it came to the final showdown between her and me, Evelyn, just 20 years old, looked as aged as someone in their 60s. Her once jet-black, lustrous hair had become dry and gray, and her once bright eyes grew dull and clouded. Below the fighting ring, she stared at me with a deathly gaze, muttering under her breath, "I must be the Dragon Queen. I will become the Dragon Queen." "Sister, are you daydreaming in broad daylight?" I smiled sweetly. She suddenly realized her slip of the tongue and pursed her lips, staring at me intently. If looks could kill, I'd probably be dead hundreds of times over, but unfortunately, looks can't kill, only strength can. The battle on the arena was already raging fiercely. Bruce seemed to be staking everything, frantically channeling his inner energy as he madly lunged at Charles. Laughable. This was nothing more than a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The gap between post-awakening and pre-awakening was an insurmountable chasm, not something Bruce could bridge just by absorbing a few more energies. Bruce's every attack, carried with a ferocious aura, was effortlessly dodged by Charles, and every strike from Charles landed heavily on Bruce's body. The chaotic energy around Bruce grew increasingly unstable, and I realized he was about to go berserk. "Charles," I shouted. He glanced at me and immediately understood what I meant. Bruce is in a very unstable state right now, and if he goes berserk, he might even harm the guests. Just as Charles was about to deliver the final blow to Bruce, Evelyn suddenly spoke up. Bruce, maybe we should give up. I don't want to die. Ah. Hearing these words, Bruce instantly flew into a rage, his spiritual energy surging backward, his crimson eyes filled with hatred glaring straight at Evelyn. It's all your fault. You wretched woman, if it weren't for you choosing me, I would have become the Dragon King by now. It's all because of you. As he spoke, he actually leaped off the arena, charging straight toward Evelyn. He had completely lost his mind, his chaotic spiritual energy rampaging wildly through his body, threatening to self-destruct at any moment. Help me, sister, please. She was actually running towards me for help. Stay away from Elizabeth. Seeing this, Charles also jumped off the ring and kicked Evelyn in the opposite direction. Evelyn rolled several times on the ground and couldn't get up anymore, only able to watch helplessly as Bruce approached step by step. Bruce suddenly let out a painful howl. This was the signal that he was about to self-destruct. Charles quickly shielded me beneath him, using his body to erect a solid wall of protection for me. With a loud boom, Bruce's body vanished, and the massive surge of spiritual energy that erupted destroyed the entire arena, leaving many guests severely injured. Only I remained unharmed under Charles's protection. Charles suffered only minor flesh wounds on his back, and later he even playfully whined for me to personally apply medicine to his injuries. Evelyn also survived the explosion, but she did so by grabbing an elderly bystander to shield herself. The old man died instantly, while she only suffered 2 broken legs. As the head of the household, I naturally could no longer tolerate such a menace remaining in the mansion as the young mistress, so I banished her to the servants' thatched hut, where she would have to work alongside them to atone for her sins once her legs healed. After all, we were once like sisters, and I still wanted to see Evelyn one last time. As soon as I entered the hut, a foul stench hit me, and I covered my nose in disgust. Evelyn glared at me with a vicious look, as if her gaze could bore a hole through me. You're the one who did this to me. How dare you come here? No one here offered her water to drink. Evelyn's voice had become hoarse and unpleasant. Why wouldn't I dare to come? Can you still move me now? I looked down at her, my gaze filled with pity. Sister, I know you've been reborn, but in this life, you're still living so miserably. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I would be the head of the family and even become the Dragon Queen. Evelyn angrily propped herself up on her elbows, but lacking the strength to support herself, she collapsed heavily back down. Don't be in such a hurry, sister, I've already found a wonderful place for you. I sat by her bedside, caressing her gaunt and withered face with my fair and delicate hand. It's the Marquis of Guard's residence. The Marquis of Guard is the most powerful noble in the dynasty. Evelyn's eyes instantly lit up. I knew your good days wouldn't last long. Just wait until I marry the Marquis of Guard. Let's see how long you can keep up your smugness then. My elder sister once again lifted her haughty head, asserting her authority as the eldest sister over me. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. My dear sister, do you know why you were sent to Lord Guard's residence? I took a few steps back because the smell coming from her was truly unbearable. Evelyn somehow developed the confidence to think that Lord Guard had taken a liking to her. Let me tell you, do you know who that person was that you pulled in front of you to block the bullet? Evelyn's expression froze for a moment, but she still forced herself to say, wasn't she just some ordinary old woman? An ordinary old woman. The one who died in your place was the wet nurse of Marquis Guard, a figure respected by the entire household of the Marquis. What? Evelyn was as if struck by lightning, collapsing straight to the ground. Her eyes vacant as she stared at the ceiling, no longer responding to anything I said. I couldn't stand the nauseating smell in the room any longer, so I stepped out and had Marquis of Guard's people take Evelyn away. It is said that from then on, the secret chamber of Marquis of Guard's residence echoed daily with the screams of a woman. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. I've been married to General Smith for 3 months, yet we've never consummated the marriage. In a fit of anger, I brought home a merman for excitement. The merman had a robust physique and was incredibly pleasant to touch, but the young general burst into the room at midnight, nearly severing the fish tail with his sword. Why don't you speak of your loneliness? Am I, a general, inferior to this eunuch? The latter tugged at my skirt and slowly explained, I am a merman. Not a eunuch. A eunuch cannot bring joy to my lady, but I can, mother said. The 3rd month of spring is the perfect season for love. I found this quite reasonable, because I dreamed of sleeping with Charles Smith every night. Unfortunately, after marriage, he avoided me like the plague, sleeping in separate rooms every day. In the morning when he practiced swordplay, I would stand by with a handful of candied chestnuts, offering pointers, bend your body a little more, this way. The gaze can peek into the collar, take bigger steps, this makes it easier to see those long legs clearly. My husband's legs are longer than my life. Charles Smith wielded a long sword with impeccable precision, while I was intently staring at the bridge of his nose. With such a tall and straight nose, he must be great in bed. Charles Smith's step suddenly faltered, and his sword swung off course by several degrees. I'm tired. He threw the sword to the servant beside him. His voice slightly hoarse. No more practice. I popped a chestnut into my mouth, feeling somewhat disappointed. Seems like the stamina isn't quite there. Somehow, Charles Smith's footsteps paused just as he had taken a step, and he turned back. He bent down to pick up the sword. Might as well practice. One should finish what one starts. He didn't even glance at me as he spoke, his gaze so resolute it was as if he were enlisting in the army. Charles Smith has his reasons for not touching me. The damned man has always wanted to renounce the world and become a monk, but his family forced him to marry. Day and night, he avoids me, terrified I might ruin his virginity. I struggled for 3 months, threats, seduction, coquetry, tantrums. I tried them all. This person just refuses to look me in the eye. Exhausted from the struggle, I couldn't help but grab his sleeve and demand, Charles Smith, aren't you afraid I'll get too lonely and go find another man? Charles Smith paused for 2 seconds before replying indifferently, as long as it pleases my wife. Fine, I retorted angrily. Tonight I'll go to the Spring Breeze Pavilion and bring a man back for some fun. He lowered his eyes. As you wish, madam. This was my first time visiting a brothel. The courtyard was filled with beautiful women, alluring and full of life. Everything looked novel to me, and I rewarded everyone I met. Soon, my lavish spending earned me an invitation to the private room upstairs by the madam. We've just received some fresh goods at Spring Breeze Pavilion today. Would the young lady care to take a look? Guaranteed to satisfy. I didn't understand what she meant by fresh goods, but I pretended to be worldly and nodded. Bring them here for a look. Soon, the madam lifted the curtain and entered again, followed by a merman, a deep blue fishtail, the bare upper half of his body strong and taut. Looking further up, I almost thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The merman had a face identical to Charles Smith's. Unlike Charles Smith's ascetic and indifferent demeanor, the merman sat there, merely lowering his eyes meekly, doing nothing, yet the teardrop mole at the corner of his eye was already captivating. I stood frozen for a long moment before gesturing for him to come closer. Come here. He obediently came over. What's your name? The mermaid lowered his eyes. I have no name. After I slipped money to the madam to buy him, he whispered softly, please, master, bestow a name upon me. Master, I felt inexplicably embarrassed. Better call me madam. I'm married now. Yes, madam. Good girl. I sighed inwardly. What a fine fish. The merman's eyelids seemed to tremble slightly. After a pause, he spoke again. May the lady bestow a name upon me. I glanced at the merman's robust physique and blurted out, then I shall call you Charlie Smith. The meaning is simple and straightforward, a man stronger than Charles Smith. The merman fell silent. After hesitating for a long while, he tentatively suggested, if not, madam, you can call me Charlie. That works too. I couldn't resist and gave his wet fish tail a stroke. At first, he obediently indulged my curiosity, but then, perhaps I touched something I shouldn't have. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, his ears turning red. My lady, not here, not like this. I brought Charlie back to the general's residence. To avoid drawing attention, I took him directly over the wall into the courtyard and then to my room. By the bedside, I held up an oil lamp to examine carefully. Alike, truly alike, apart from the teardrop mole, the only difference lies in their demeanor. Charles Smith is aloof and distant, like an unattainable flower on a high peak, evoking no desire to profane. Yet this merman's eyes are filled with unmistakable desire. See how he sits here with downcast eyes, docile in demeanor, but when you lift his chin, you can see the naked possessiveness in his gaze. Still, I refuse to believe it. How could there be people who look exactly alike in this world? Even the curve at the corner of his eyes was identical to the Charles Smith in my memory. Without the slightest difference, I rubbed hard at the teardrop mole on his face until the skin turned red, yet the mole remained. The man pressed his lips together, silent, not even crying out in pain, extremely well behaved. Wait here for a moment, I whispered, I'll be right back. Okay. Once outside, I hurried to the side courtyard. Tonight, dark clouds obscured the moon, making the sky especially dark. As I entered the courtyard gate, I nearly tripped and fell. I tiptoed into Charles Smith's room and immediately spotted the figure on the bed. He was tightly wrapped in blankets, sleeping restlessly, with a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead, yet the corners of his eyes were clean. There was no trace of that tear mole. I quietly retreated and turned back to my own room. As soon as I entered, I saw Charlie sitting on the edge of the bed, his enormous azure tail lightly brushing the floor. The flickering firelight danced across his scales, creating a dazzling play of colors. A breeze brushed past me, and I realized the window had cracked open slightly without my noticing, but I distinctly remember closing it when I left. Noticing my gaze, Charlie explained, "The wind was strong earlier. It pushed the window open a bit." "Is that so?" I walked over slowly, tilting his chin with my fingers. "Enough with the act. You're Charles Smith, aren't you?" Charlie's eyes showed a hint of confusion. "Who?" Still pretending. I reached out to tug at his fishtail. "No wonder you wouldn't let me touch you at the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Afraid I'd find a flaw, weren't you?" Quite realistic, I must say. However, no matter how much I felt around, I couldn't find even a loose thread. The fishtail seemed truly fused with the upper body. Charlie sighed, leaned over, and pressed down on my restless, probing hand. "Madam need not test further. Charlie is indeed a merman." I remained silent for a long while, then, swallowing hard, a sudden curiosity arose in me. "So, do mermaids have the ability to marry and have children in that regard?" I asked as tactfully as I could. Charlie paused for a moment, his ears turning red. "Yes, more than one, actually." His response was blunt and audacious. Even though he was a fish, I found myself blushing furiously in that moment. "More than one? How many?" I clicked my tongue in amazement, marveling inwardly at how well-fed the mermaid maidens must be. I cleared my throat, but my true thoughts slipped out. "Don't believe me? Want to see, madam?" Charlie pursed his lips, his ethereal voice tinged with evasion. I thought to myself that mermaids truly have simple temperaments. He must have been startled by me. Just as I was pondering how to comfort him, he suddenly grabbed me, guiding my hand to a certain place, holding a handful of scalding heat. My thoughts in the dead of night were still sluggish. I withdrew my hand and mumbled, "Did you hide a heating bottle under your tail?" Only after the words left my mouth did I realize how utterly foolish I sounded. Sure enough, a low chuckle came from above. This man was already bewitching by nature, and now with his eyes curved and laughter directed at me, that teardrop mole became even more alluring. He leaned in, shedding the docile demeanor he had when I first bought him, encircling me on the couch with an assertive and dominant stance. As he spoke, his warm breath brushed against my neck, an unbearable tickle. "Would madam like to give it a try?" I was determined to refuse, but that face, identical to Charles Smith's, leaned in with overwhelming force. I was renowned for my martial prowess, my bare-handed tiger hunt once famous throughout the capital, rivaling even the second son of the Wu family. Yet now, I couldn't even push away this merman's single hand. The hand I pressed against his shoulder was instead pinned above my head, his fingers slowly interlacing with mine, caressing. It tickled a little when it brushed against my palm. "Since you're already married, aren't you afraid your husband at home will find out?" "I'm not afraid." Mentioning Charles Smith, I petulantly squeezed his hand in return. "My old man's heart is as pure as a Bodhi tree, and his lower half doesn't rise to the occasion. He's just a little bald monk who hasn't shaved his head." Charlie was silent for a few seconds, then chuckled. "So the man my lady married is a bald monk. How unfortunate for you." As he spoke, he nuzzled against my palm. The tone was bewitching. "How does the lady find me?" They say the mermaid's song can bewitch the mind, but I disagree. This man's words were sweeter than any song. Just a light, casual phrase, a single glance, and he could set a fire in one's heart. Yet in the end, reason prevailed. Charlie's fish tail barely touched me when I pushed him away. Enough, yet. The moment those words left my lips, the door was kicked open. The cedar door slammed heavily against the wall with a dull, resonant thud. Someone strode in with a sword, exuding an aura of deadly intent. With a flick of the blade, they nearly severed the fish tail. The perpetually monotonous tone finally showed a ripple of emotion at this moment. "If my lady was lonely, why didn't you say so? Could it be that this general is inferior to a eunuch?" Charles Smith's gaze fell upon Charlie's face, paused, then he laughed mockingly. "So it's just a substitute." Behind me, the fishtail shrank back slightly, yet it dared to retort, "I'm a merman, not a eunuch. A eunuch cannot please my lady, but I can." I had imagined 10,000 possible reactions from Charles Smith in my mind, yet he turned out to be the 10,001st. Without anger or reproach, he sheathed his sword instead, lifted the hem of his robe, and sat down in a chair, as if preparing to watch a show, happy. Just a plaything brought back to the mansion. Do you really think she'd dare to do anything with you? As he spoke, he placed the sword on the table and slightly raised his right hand. Madam, please continue. Our gazes met. Charles Smith's eyes were hollow and indifferent, showing no trace of emotion. It must be true that he doesn't love me at all. On our wedding day, he made me sign an agreement stating that we would not interfere with each other after marriage, leaving us with a marriage in name only. I bit my lip and, under the insistent gaze of Charles Smith, stood up and straddled Charlie's lap, wrapping my arms around his neck. It was so cold beneath me, the thin fabric brushed against his fishtail, the touch icy cold. Just as I was struggling with whether to kiss Charlie in front of Charles Smith, sudden footsteps echoed from outside the courtyard. Young master, what happened? The butler's voice came from afar, filled with anxiety, likely because the commotion of Charles Smith kicking the door open had woken the servants in the mansion. Stay back, Charles Smith shouted sharply, halting those approaching footsteps. It's nothing, he said, glancing at me as he flicked a stone to extinguish the lamp, just a nightmare. After dismissing the servants, he seemed to lose interest in continuing to watch the play. Rising to his feet, he instantly reverted to his usual serene and untroubled demeanor, resembling a detached Buddhist monk. On our wedding day, we signed a pledge. Since you couldn't endure the loneliness, seeking some pleasure is understandable. I won't interfere, but, after all, a mermaid is hardly presentable. Keep him in your chamber, but don't let him be seen. With that, he turned and left, even taking care to reattach the door I had kicked off its hinges before departing. He really did that. I'm so moved I could cry. The home was nearly stolen, yet he still remembered to fix the door for others. A Buddhist practitioner's tolerance is truly different from ordinary people's. Charlie thus stayed in my residence. However, to avoid drawing attention, he would only appear at night and leave my room at dawn every day. Even I didn't know where he went. I just kept a mermaid. Yet it truly gave me the illusion of nightly affairs. Madam, swallow it. The mermaid's slender fingers brushed past the corner of my mouth, wiping away the remnants of the medicinal broth. Taking advantage of his inattention, I spat it out again in one go. It's so bitter. I've always had a cold constitution, and recently, with my monthly cycle, I've been feeling a dull pain in my lower abdomen. The physician prescribed some tonics for me, but they're all unbearably bitter. A few sips of the herbal concoction sliding down my throat immediately made me retch. Charlie knelt before me, coaxing me over and over, but the bowl of dark, thick medicine barely diminished. I lost my patience too and curled up on the couch. I won't drink it, it tastes awful. A soft sigh from Charlie sounded by the couch. I heard him set the medicine bowl down, thinking he was about to give up, when suddenly he turned me around and pressed his warm, soft lips against mine. Lips parted, and the warm medicinal broth was passed over. The palm resting behind my head exerted a slight pressure, leaving me no room to evade. Yet even after the medicine was gone, he still didn't stop. Breaths intertwined as the bitterness of the broth slowly spread. In my dazed state, I thought, the mermaid's kissing skills are truly masterful. Then, Charlie let go and kissed my earlobe, sighing, Madam, this is Charlie's first kiss. I don't believe it, he laughed, offering no further explanation, but picked up the bowl of medicinal soup again. My face flushed, and I thought to myself, is he going to kiss me again? Charlie chuckled softly, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear. No more kisses, my lady, drink it while it's hot. I was stunned, but I hadn't said a word. Charlie handed the soup bowl to me, watching me pinch my nose and gulp it down. He then explained, the mermaid clan has always possessed the ability to read minds. Taking the empty bowl, he slightly bent down to meet my gaze. We can hear the thoughts of those we love. On the 9th day of the 3rd month, the dowager of the Marquis' residence celebrated her 80th birthday, and as the young mistress, I had to attend alongside Charles Smith. I detest these kinds of occasions the most, yet I still have to put on a show. Charles Smith remains as cold toward me as ever. If not for the limited space in the carriage, he would probably keep a whole street's distance between us. The entire journey, the carriage rocked and jolted, yet as I stared at Charles Smith's face, all I could think about was that mermaid. He still hasn't satisfied my curiosity yet. Just how many mermaids are there? As I pondered this, Charles Smith beside me suddenly choked on his own saliva and coughed incessantly. I wanted to pat his back to help him catch his breath, but he dodged my touch by turning away. That damned bald monk. I sulked and sat back on the other side of the carriage, twisting my handkerchief and refusing to speak to him. Feeling bored, my mind wandered aimlessly to thoughts of Charlie. Who knows where he hides during the day, or what he eats and drinks? Could he be performing at some circus troupe to earn his meals? The mermaid's fish tail was sleek and glossy. Could that thing be hidden beneath the scales? Truth be told, Charlie's demeanor and speech somewhat resembled that young Marquis, Vincent. Speaking of which, Vincent once confessed his feelings to me. Back then, I was young and foolish, so I flatly rejected him. Lost in these wandering thoughts, I arrived at the Marquis's estate before I knew it. The carriage came to a halt, and I heard a clamor of voices outside. As I lifted the curtain, I casually asked, "Who's outside the carriage?" The words had barely left his lips. A sullen voice beside me responded, "Your young Marquis." What? I turned in surprise, only to catch a glimpse of Charles Smith's cold profile. His expression remained unreadable as he repeated, "The Marquis's residence, the young Marquis." "Oh," I responded sheepishly, "I must have misheard earlier." Lost in thought, Charles Smith had already lifted the carriage curtain and stepped down. Perhaps because there were outsiders present, he paused mid-step and even extended a hand to help me alight from the carriage. Young Marquis Vincent was standing at the entrance of the residence, exchanging a few words with those beside him before coming forward to greet us. The newcomer wore a lake blue robe, exuding an air of refined elegance. Unlike Charles Smith's aloof demeanor, the young Marquis was courteous in his movements, his gaze exceptionally gentle. After exchanging greetings with Charles Smith, Vincent turned his gaze toward me. He paused, nodded slightly, then looked away. Charles Smith brushed past him and, seeing me still standing there, turned back with a somewhat impatient tone. "Aren't you coming?" "Oh," with a lazy response, I followed Charles Smith into the mansion, but I was too busy looking around and didn't notice the threshold. Tripping over it, a hand reached out from the side just in time to steady me. Vincent, once he saw I had regained my balance, he quickly let go. He only said, "Be careful." I didn't even have time to say thanks when Charles Smith in front of me got impatient, yanking me into the mansion with a harsh tone. "Hurry up." He glanced at me sideways, tripping over a doorstep. How clumsy. His hand gripped my wrist, the touch rough. It made me miss Charlie for a fleeting moment. However, Charlie is much gentler than this bald monk. The Marquis's residence was bustling with activity today. Not being from an official family, I wasn't quite accustomed to such occasions, so I followed closely behind Charles Smith, taking in the sights and enjoying the lively atmosphere. However, soon enough, the excitement turned its attention to me. It wasn't long before someone actively approached. I remembered her, Jenny, the youngest daughter of a vice minister, known for her spoiled nature. Rumor had it she had admired Charles Smith for years but had never succeeded in winning his affection. She took the initiative to strike up a conversation with Charles Smith. Unfortunately, this man fancied himself a Bodhi tree beneath Guanin's seat, utterly detached from worldly desires. Though Jenny lowered herself to make small talk, he remained cold-faced, only occasionally uttering a perfunctory, Her passionate advances met with icy rejection, and Jenny, her pride wounded, quickly turned her hostility toward me. After giving me a thorough once-over, she remarked with a smile, "The young madam's feet seem quite different from ours. My mother used to say that women with large hands and feet are bold and unrefined by nature, and today I see it's truly extraordinary." As she spoke, she inadvertently revealed her 3-inch golden lotus feet beneath her skirt. I didn't understand the intricacies of courtly relations, so I bit my tongue and remained silent. I truly couldn't comprehend these noble ladies, how bound feet could become a topic of conversation. I grew up traveling the rivers and lakes with my father, never bound my feet into golden lotuses, nor learned needlework. My father certainly didn't teach me the so-called 3 obediences and 4 virtues of womanhood. My father only taught me a set of extraordinary sword skills. It was precisely with these sword skills that I nearly struck down Charles Smith with a single stroke on the Smith family's martial arts competition stage for marriage. Becoming the young mistress of the Smith household, after the lively greetings, everyone took their seats, with officials and their female companions seated separately, and Jenny took the initiative to sit beside me. What terrible luck! After the banquet began, Jenny was chatting happily with the ladies and young misses at our table, while I didn't know a single soul and just kept my head down to eat. Suddenly, as I raised my chopsticks to pick up a meatball, I failed to grasp it, and the falling meatball splashed quite a bit of sauce back onto the plate. Jenny gasped in surprise and hurriedly wiped the spilled soup from her clothes with a handkerchief. Just as I was about to say, "Sorry," I heard her say, "Young mistress, didn't your mother teach you table manners when you were little?" Then, she covered her mouth again and added, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you don't have a mother." the words, "don't have a mother," instantly struck a nerve. I truly grew up without a mother. I was an abandoned infant left in the wilderness, nearly devoured by wolves when my father rescued me and took me in to raise. As for my birth parents, they remain unfound to this day. I set down my chopsticks heavily. I turned my head to look at her, as she said, "We who roam the rivers and lakes are accustomed to boldness." The next moment, my voice rang out clearly for all to hear. "I thought you just had bound feet, but it turns out your brain is bound too. What if I don't have a mother? You had a mother to teach you, yet you're so petty and rude. If I were your mother, I'd probably wish I could shove you back into the womb to spare the shame of bringing you into this world." Jenny froze. She probably never expected that I, the famously unfavored young mistress with no backing, would dare to publicly scold her, and with such blunt, harsh words. Her face flushed red, and her eyes welled up with tears, as everyone turned to look. The other ladies at the table quickly stepped in to mediate and smooth things over. I couldn't be bothered to say more and glanced toward Charles Smith, expecting him to be angry or cold-faced. Instead, he didn't even look this way, calmly picking up a lotus seed with his chopsticks. The curve at the corner of his lips actually seemed like a smile. I thought Jenny would learn her lesson after being publicly scolded by me, but though she kept her mouth shut, her hands were still restless, deliberately knocking over a wine glass and spilling it all over me. "I'm truly sorry." She tried to wipe my clothes with an oil-stained silk handkerchief, but I stopped her. "No need." I wiped it myself, accidentally exposing my wrist in the process. Jenny glanced at it and froze instantly. Before I could react, she exclaimed loudly, "Young madam, you've been married to young General Smith for several months, yet the chastity mark is still there." A single sentence instantly drew everyone's attention. At the next table, old General David Smith's expression changed in an instant. He glared at me coldly and slammed his chopsticks heavily on the table. "Charles Smith is the only heir of the general's household. The old general has been nearly obsessed with longing for a grandson. Seeing that there was no movement after several months of marriage, he had someone bring me various tonics every day." Now that he knew Charles Smith and I had not yet shared a bed, his face turned even more terrifyingly dark. A classmate, ever the mischief maker, immediately teased Charles Smith. "How can a young general like you resist such a beautiful wife?" Charles Smith continued eating calmly, not even lifting an eyebrow. "I've been devoted to Buddhist practices recently, purifying my body and mind. I have no interest in worldly affairs." General Xia snorted coldly. "No interest in worldly affairs. It's clear he married a rogue woman who doesn't fulfill her wifely duties." The old general, being blunt and straightforward by nature, didn't mind airing dirty laundry in public and openly reprimanded him on the spot. Most of the bureaucrats at the table were sycophants who thrived on flattery. Hearing this, they quickly chimed in with the general's remarks. Some even went so far as to advise Charles Smith, saying that my marriage to him was already reaching above my station and that I shouldn't be indulged too much. They urged Charles Smith to prioritize continuing the family line, suggesting he expand the family tree as soon as possible, and if that didn't work, to take a few concubines to ensure the Smith family's legacy. I watched Charles Smith's reaction from across the table. He frowned, his face unusually expressive for once, yet, the first person to speak up for me was the young Marquis. Vincent calmly retorted, "It was clearly Master Smith who was purifying himself through Buddhist practices. What does that have to do with his wife? Today is my grandmother's birthday banquet. Gentlemen, let us refrain from discussing others' family matters." Listening closely, I silently marveled in my heart. The young Marquis truly lived up to his reputation as the gentleman praised by all in the capital, so gentle and, before the praise could be finished, a dull thud was heard from that side. Charles Smith slammed his chopsticks down heavily. He even seemed to glance at me. "The young Marquis is right. It's my fault. What does it have to do with my wife?" This person openly exposed their own shortcomings, yet remained utterly composed, saying, "It's because I'm devoted to Buddhism. I can't perform." I nearly spat out my tea. Did I misunderstand? He meant he can't perform, right? The hall fell into complete silence. Old General Smith's expression grew increasingly somber. After a long pause, someone awkwardly laughed and tried to smooth things over. "Haha, young General Smith certainly has a sense of humor." Just as the atmosphere grew tense, a herald's voice suddenly rang out from outside the mansion. "Princess Karina has arrived." Everyone rose to their feet to welcome her. I stole glances at her through the crowd. This was my first time seeing the princess. Her features were delicate and striking, her demeanor naturally elegant, with a habitual slight tilt of her chin that carried an air of innate pride. yet there was none of the spoiled willfulness one might expect from someone overly indulged. I had heard that Princess Karina had always been frail in health and had spent the past few years recuperating outside the palace, only returning last month. The young Marquis invited the princess to take the seat of honor, but she declined. Her gaze swept across the room and finally came to rest slowly on Charles Smith. I silently sighed, sensing trouble. That damned Bodhi seed was particularly adept at attracting admirers. Sure enough, the next moment, the princess pointed at Charles Smith and said haughtily, "That must be young General Smith, correct? I have some matters to discuss with him. I'll sit over there." Everyone knew the emperor had always doted on this frail princess since her childhood. Who would dare refuse? The official to Charles Smith's right hastily rose to offer his seat. Only Charles Smith remained composed, his expression as detached and indifferent as ever. Even with the golden-branched, jade-leaved princess seated beside him, he still couldn't be bothered to spare more than a word or two in response. No matter what topics the princess initiated, his replies were limited to fine. Or, all right. On rare occasions when he extended his answers, it was merely to say, "The princess speaks wisely." After several rounds, the princess's expression also darkened. As the birthday banquet neared its end, an unexpected incident suddenly occurred. Dozens of black-clad assailants stormed the Marquis's estate, ignoring the gathered officials in the courtyard, their target solely the princess. The Marquis's guards rushed to intercept, yet two of the black-clad figures slipped through, their long swords gleaming coldly as they thrust straight toward Princess Karina. I casually grabbed the bamboo chopsticks from the table and flung them. A sharp whistle cut through the air as the chopsticks pierced the black-clad man's arm, splattering blood onto the princess's skirt and drawing a shriek from her. Seizing the moment as the black-clad man fell, I leaped forward, snatched the sword he had dropped, and engaged in combat with another black-clad assailant. Mid-fight, I stole a glance. My husband truly has a great mood. Still damn well eating. The princess was practically scared to death hiding behind him. Okay, I was speechless inside and had no intention of showing off, so I quickened my movements and slit his throat with a single sword stroke. The remaining black-clad assassins, seeing their attempt had failed, all fled in retreat. The Marquis's guards would naturally pursue them. It had nothing to do with me. I threw down the blood-stained sword and turned to return to the table when suddenly someone grabbed my arm. Turning around, I saw it was the princess. This very same princess who had just taken a liking to my husband now looked up at me with her pale little face and sincerely praised. "You were so cool just now." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I wanted to pull my arm away but hesitated, not daring to do so. "Thank you for your praise, Your Highness." The princess was not as difficult to get along with as the rumors suggested. Perhaps it was because she hadn't spent much time in the palace. Aside from a certain innate arrogance, her gaze was clear, and she didn't put on any airs when getting close to others. After asking for my name, she inquired about my identity. I paused for a moment, then pointed at Charles Smith. "That's my husband." The princess was shocked. "Young General Smith is already married." "Yes," I smiled bitterly. "The one getting married is none other than myself." The princess fell silent for a moment, her eyes filled with unmistakable pity, yet she still sighed and said, "You two are quite a match." With that, she no longer sought advice from Charles Smith. Instead, she took my arm and led me to the table. Despite having just screamed in terror from the assassin's attack, she now seemed in high spirits, chatting animatedly with me after sitting down. To be honest, I don't know if Jenny is usually too spoiled at home or simply born with a lack of common sense. Even though she could clearly see the princess was quite interested in me at the moment, she still dared to gossip beside us. She lowered her voice and advised, "Your Highness, don't be fooled by her. Before marrying into the general's household, she was just a wandering performer. Associating with such a person might lower your highness's status." "Such a person?" The princess glanced at her, raising an eyebrow, and an overwhelming sense of authority suddenly filled the air. "Then tell me, what kind of person is my savior?" The phrase, savior, instantly elevated me to a position where Jenny dared not act recklessly. Jenny's face turned pale, stammering without being able to utter a single word. Princess Karina snorted coldly. "Why so silent now? Which family's gossipmonger dares to stir up trouble right before me?" Someone nearby immediately whispered in response, "Your Highness, that's the youngest daughter of the Vice Minister of Revenue." Karina smiled. "Lord James has always been upright and incorruptible, with an excellent reputation in the court. How could his family upbringing be like this?" The minister at the next table could no longer sit still and immediately stood up to scold his daughter. "Aren't you going to apologize to the princess? Your Highness is right to reprimand me." Jenny bit her lip hard and lowered her head deeply. This subject should not have spoken out of turn. Karina, however, did not respond, only tilting her head to look at me. Are you satisfied, Josephine? I lowered my eyes. What Miss Jenny said is true. Before Josephine married into the general's household, she was indeed a wandering performer. Karina nodded. So you're dissatisfied. With that, she looked thoughtfully at Jenny. Even someone as spoiled and slow-witted as Jenny understood Karina's implication. She stiffly turned to face me, biting her lip repeatedly before finally saying, I'm sorry. I felt quite pleased inside. Jenny had just been publicly scolded by me and didn't gain any advantage, yet now she had to lower her head and apologize. What a loser. After the Marquis's birthday banquet, I actually became friends with Karina. She has a simple nature and, having spent many years away from the palace, dislikes its intrigues and deceptions. Whenever she has free time, she rushes off to the general's residence. However, ever since learning that I am Charles Smith's wife, she has deliberately kept her distance from him whenever they meet. Their encounters are limited to slight nods, with hardly any words exchanged. Charles Smith and I remain a superficially married couple with a distant relationship, yet, Charlie and I grow closer with each passing night. One day, while I was rummaging through Charles Smith's room for something, I accidentally spotted a deep blue scale on his bed. It was Charlie's. I picked it up and asked Charlie about it. After a moment of silence, he only admitted that he had dropped it while stealing something from Charles Smith's room. When I asked what he had gone to steal, Charlie pulled out a white jade ring from behind him, translucent and clearly made of the finest jade. A sudden sense of foreboding came over me. Sure enough, after asking around, I learned that Charlie had stolen Charles Smith's most treasured jade pendant and had it crafted into a white jade ring for me. I hurriedly put the ring away. This is not something to be worn casually. Charles Smith would probably be furious enough to kill if he found out. Indeed, that night, Charles Smith, who was usually indifferent to everything, nearly turned the mansion upside down in his search, ultimately attributing the incident to a thief sneaking into the estate. That night, the renowned monk of the capital lost his temper for the first time, smashing half the room in his fury, vowing to capture the thief and flay him alive. Meanwhile, the real culprit was in the chamber, coaxing me to take my medicine. Does my lady refuse the medicine? Shall I feed it to you? I suddenly recalled that night. My face flushed hot as I snatched the medicine bowl from him. Fine, I'll drink it, gulping down the entire bowl of bitter medicine. Just as the acrid taste filled my mouth, Charlie knelt before me, cradling my face as he kissed me slowly and deliberately. The tenderness and lingering sweetness of his kiss truly dispelled the bitter taste of the medicine. When I was nearly breathless, I pushed him away slightly and whispered in a low voice, I have a husband. Charlie, however, pinched my chin and leaned in to kiss me again, his voice slightly hoarse. But he can't. If he can't, then you can. Charlie laughed. Madam, you're welcome to try. His palm was scorching hot as he grasped my hand and tried to guide it downward. I quickly pulled back. I'm tired, let's sleep. Charlie didn't say anything, just carefully tucked me in. As dusk fell, Karina arrived at the mansion. Josephine. She had barely stepped into my courtyard when she called out loudly, Josephine. I hurried out to greet her and was about to bow when she stopped me. Enough, we're not strangers. As she spoke, she raised her hand, and the maid following her handed over 2 bundles. What's this? She winked at me and unfolded them. They were 2 sets of men's clothing. Josephine, I heard there's a mermaid at the Spring Breeze Pavilion in the capital these days, said to be extraordinarily beautiful. Will you take me to see it, please? Just the 2 of us. Yes, she whispered, lowering her voice. With too many people, there's bound to be gossip, and if it reaches my father, he'll scold me again. We'll disguise ourselves as men and keep a low profile. No one will recognize us. Besides, with you protecting me, nothing bad will happen. She coaxed and threatened me for a long while, and in the end, I couldn't hold out any longer and agreed. But after changing into men's clothing, I glanced at the jade pendant she always wore and never parted with. At first, I thought of asking her to remove it, but after a moment's consideration, I took it and hung it at my own waist. Karina and I both have delicate, refined features to begin with. Dressed as men, with our eyebrows deliberately darkened and our complexions slightly dulled, we could pass for somewhat similar at a glance. If we were to encounter any troublemakers, the dim lighting in the Spring Breeze Pavilion would ensure their first target would be the jade pendant. After all, Karina has a special status, and I was worried about causing trouble. Before leaving the mansion, while she wasn't paying attention, I quietly instructed the maids in the room to inform Charles Smith, Although Charles Smith is somewhat indifferent by nature, he still understands the urgency and importance of matters. At the Spring Breeze Pavilion, although it was my second time visiting, I still found it quite novel. After changing into men's clothing with Karina, as soon as we entered, a courtesan approached, leaning against us with her soft, fragrant embrace. In that instant, I finally understood those wretched men. Who can resist this? Karina and I found a quiet spot, ordered some delicate dishes and a fine wine. The girl beside us was quite attentive, feeding us drinks cup by cup right to our lips. On stage, the courtesan danced enchantingly to the floating melodies. No wonder men linger here, reluctant to leave. However, there are always some tactless individuals who ruin the mood, before the dance could even finish. Several men from the neighboring tables suddenly slammed the table and headed straight toward us. I sighed inwardly. Here we go again. What has this delicate little princess done to offend anyone? Why do waves of people keep trying to assassinate her? Before Karina could react, I had already ducked behind her, shouting, "Josephine, save me," and inadvertently revealed the jade pendant at my waist. Indeed, those blind fools charged straight at me, seizing the moment. I used a palm strike to gently push Karina away and whispered urgently, "Go, return to the general's manor." Before I could say more, I was seized. I dared not resist, for if I fought back now, they would surely notice Karina. Outnumbered, I might not be able to protect her. However, I never expected these villains to be such strong runners. They actually carried me all the way to the edge of a cliff. They sealed my acupoints, not intending to kill me on the spot. As if they were capturing me alive to wait for someone, but in just a short while, the person they were waiting for never arrived. Instead, it was the young Marquis who showed up. Vincent. He came bearing a sword, his sleeves fluttering without wind. Such a gentleman now appeared brimming with killing intent. Let her go. Back at the Spring Breeze Pavilion, I had glimpsed someone from afar who looked like him. I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks, but it really was him. In such a tense moment, my mind still wandered with the thought, so even a noble gentleman like the young Marquis would visit brothels. Vincent, armed with a single sword, stood his ground unyieldingly against the assassins. His skills were formidable, but even the best fighter can be overwhelmed. As he began to lose the upper hand, he feinted with his sword and swiftly leaped to my side. The attackers, thinking he intended to rescue me, thrust their blades toward him, only to be deftly dodged. Once beside me, Vincent quickly undid the pressure points that had immobilized me. Finally, I was free. I smiled, kicked over the nearest assassin, snatched his sword barehanded, and turned to charge into the thick of battle. I had never fought alongside Vincent before, yet our coordination was remarkably seamless. What a pity, the assassins' reinforcements arrived first. Vincent and I still couldn't hold our ground, blocking several attackers with a single sword. I turned and shouted, "You go first." I had merely saved the young Marquis once many years ago. The kindness from those bygone days had long been repaid through his repeated assistance. I didn't want to burden him further. Vincent didn't leave. Instead, he stepped in front of me, his sword dancing in an impenetrable blur. What kind of man would flee and abandon you, however? The number of enemies suddenly increased, and upon seeing the young Marquis, they seemed intent on leaving no survivors, striking with lethal force at every move. As he spoke, Vincent had already sustained several more wounds. He appears gentle, but in reality, he's stubborn as a mule. Since he refused to leave, I had no choice but to draw my sword and fight alongside him. Injuries gradually accumulated on my body. I even began to think, perhaps today would be the day I meet my end here. It's just a pity for the young Marquis, so young and yet to marry, now doomed to lose his life because of me. When the sword tip lunged toward my chest, I was too weak to dodge. In that dazed moment, what flashed through my mind was Charlie's mesmerizing eyes. Suddenly, a sharp sound split the air. A piece of rubble flew in, striking the blade with force. The opponent's thrust missed its mark, the sword merely grazing through my shoulder fabric, leaving behind a shallow streak of blood. "It's Charles Smith." He arrived with troops, his face grim as death. As I glanced at him, distracted, a palm strike landed on my chest, sending me flying backward over the cliff. "Josephine!" Charles Smith and the young Marquis's shouts rang out almost simultaneously. I wanted to step on the cliff face to push myself up, but that strike had nearly disrupted my breath, leaving me unable to gather my energy. In an instant, I was already falling. The wind howled in my ears, and in my daze, I saw someone leap down. It wasn't the young Marquis, nor was it Charlie. "It is Charles Smith." It was actually Charles Smith. that husband of mine who was devoted to Buddhism and had always neglected me, Charles Smith. Fortunately, the bottom of the cliff was not barren land but the vast ocean floor, yet, unfortunately, I can't swim. The moment I fell into the sea, I swallowed a large gulp of water, my chest ached terribly, and I couldn't muster any strength, the heavy waves blurred my vision. And I thought I saw Charles Smith, or perhaps it wasn't him. After choking on several mouthfuls of water, my entire body sank toward the ocean floor. As my consciousness began to fade, it seemed like a massive fish tail tightly wrapped around me. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a cave, with dry grass cushioning beneath me, strange, severely injured, fallen off a cliff, plunged into the sea. Yet at this moment, my condition was surprisingly good, my chest didn't hurt. And aside from feeling a bit weak, my state was exceptionally well. You heartless creature, a hushed voice suddenly sounded beside me. I turned to look and saw Charles Smith leaning against the cave wall, sitting on the ground, his face somewhat pale. Upon closer inspection, his chest was wrapped in bandages, faintly stained with blood. He glanced at me. I risked my life to save you, and you didn't even say thank you when you woke up. I leaned in, staring intently at his face. Then suddenly raised my hand and rubbed hard beneath his eyelids. Charles Smith froze for a moment, quickly pushed my hand away, and muttered, "What are you doing?" I pointed at the exposed teardrop mole at the corner of his eye where the concealer had rubbed off, smiling. "Stop hiding it. I still like this mole of yours." He fell silent for 2 seconds, then adopted a confessional tone. "Madam fell into the sea, and Charles Smith led the capture of those assassins. I jumped in to save you. Merfolk know water well. Rescuing someone at sea is easy for us." Still pretending, I leaned in, pinched his chin and shook it slightly. "Should I call you Charles Smith, or should I call you Charlie? Tell me, who was pretending to be Charles Smith that night?" Charles Smith remained silent for a long time before finally admitting in a muffled voice, "A doppelganger." I widened my eyes in surprise. "Mermaids can have doppelgangers." Charles Smith fell silent this time, however, unable to withstand my persistent questioning. He covered his face with his hand and whispered, "That place changed." I didn't catch on immediately which place. As soon as the words left my mouth, I suddenly remembered that night, under the hazy candlelight, Charlie responded bluntly that there was more than one mermaid. The moment I realized, my face burned, and I instantly fell silent. Charles Smith, on the other hand, laughed. "No more questions." I shot him a glare. "No more questions?" Charles Smith asked me when I realized that Charlie was actually Charles Smith. Mentioning this, I smiled smugly. "I knew it the moment I saw you at the Spring Breeze Pavilion. How could I not recognize the person I've adored for so long, the one I've dreamed of marrying? But, I always thought that the Charles Smith who appeared briefly that night was someone he had disguised, but I never expected it to be. How absurd." After a long pause, I suddenly leaned in close to him and patted the bandaged wound on his body. "Stop pretending. Mermaids have incredible self-healing abilities." Charles Smith silently removed the bandage, revealing smooth and flawless skin, muttering, "You seem to know quite a lot." "Of course." I blinked at him. "I know more than that." "What do you know?" "I know." Leaning close to his ear, I deliberately slowed my speech. "A mermaid's tail cannot transform into legs. If you can turn yours into a pair of legs, then one of your parents must be human. Moreover, when you take human form, you can't engage in intimate relations." "Enough." Charles Smith cut me off, even standing up and pacing around the cave twice due to his agitation. "Where did you hear such baseless rumors?" But his reddened ears betrayed him. I leaned against the cave wall and watched him. He paced nearly 10 laps before slowing down, finally sitting beside me and muttering, "You're right." The usually aloof and detached monk shed all pretense in that moment, completely becoming Charlie. He took my hand, his palm rubbing against the back of mine over and over. "Married the woman I love, yet couldn't consummate the marriage, fearing my merman identity would frighten you. Afraid you'd laugh at my impotence, so I pretended to have renounced worldly desires and lost interest in women." I chuckled and continued his line of thought, then deliberately provoked me to visit the Spring Breeze Pavilion, knowing I'd bring Charlie back to the manor, and took advantage of me using your merman identity. "Right." Charles Smith blushed. "Not exactly, my own wife. It doesn't count as taking advantage." After a long silence, Charles Smith sidled up to me, cupped my face in his hands, and asked, "My lady knows I am the merman now?" "Yes." "Will you fear me?" I smiled. "Your wife knows martial arts. One sword strike could sever your tail. Why would I ever be afraid?" Charles Smith chuckled along. "My lady is formidable. Then, his tones suddenly drew out a few notes longer as he asked in a hushed voice, "When I take human form, I can't perform the marital act. We'd have to use my true form for intimacy. Would you disdain me for that?" At the mention of this, my interest was instantly piqued. I pressed him against the cave wall and asked eagerly, "So there's really more than one?" He averted his gaze and said, "Yes, how many exactly? Do you really want to know?" "Madam, obviously." Yet Charles Smith still did not answer me. That damned man took me deep into the cave, revealing his true form. "Come here, my lady." In the dim depths of the cavern, the faint light shimmered, and in my daze, I caught another glimpse of the merman I had seen fleetingly that day at the Spring Breeze Pavilion. His face was undeniably handsome, yet the teardrop mole at the corner of his eye was utterly bewitching. I found myself walking toward him in a trance. He laid his robe on the ground, covered my eyes with his hand, and whispered, "This place is remote. The search party won't find us for a while, rest assured, my lady." I bite my lip, inexplicably nervous, barely managing to let out a soft from my throat. Clothes gradually slip away. I feel Charles Smith pressing closer. That enormous fish-tail is cold and slippery, yet his bare upper body is unusually scorching. It's so hot. As I bit my lip hard, faint footsteps could be heard outside the cave. "The search and rescue troops have found us." Charles Smith froze, and then, for the first time, I heard him curse. Charles Smith helped me out of the cave just as the soldiers arrived. "General, I have arrived late." The newcomer knelt on one knee, bowing in apology to Charles Smith. Charles Smith took a deep breath, his tones so heavy it seemed murderous. "No, you've come too early." Charles Smith took me back to his residence. The man was eager to bring me to his room to continue what we hadn't finished in the cave, but he was interrupted by someone's arrival. Someone outside the house shouted my name at the top of their lungs. "Josephine." Charles Smith sighed softly. "Women are nothing but trouble." With that, he stood up and left the room, making way for me and the anxiously waiting Princess Karina outside the door. Karina rushed through the door so hastily that she nearly collided with Charles Smith. Cursing, out of the way, she quickly sidestepped him and entered. She took my hand, scrutinizing me from head to toe before finally letting out a sigh of relief. "It's good that you're unharmed." The perfectly composed princess suddenly reddened at the eyes as she spoke. "I truly thought I'd be the death of you this time. This person is truly sincere. As a princess of noble birth, it would be my duty as a woman from a minister's family to die for her dozens of times if necessary." Yet she pressed me down at the table, sobbing and saying I was her only friend. She grew up in quiet seclusion at the temple, where the monks were rigid and dull. After returning to the palace, the concubines cautiously flattered her, the maids and eunuchs knelt before her, and though her father doted on her, he was busy with state affairs and rarely had time to accompany her. Only a reckless woman like me would dare take her, disguised as a man, to visit a brothel. "Stop right there." I pressed a finger to her lips. "My dear, don't say another word. Never mention to anyone that I took you to a brothel. If the emperor finds out, the entire general's manor might lose a layer of skin." Karina remained silent. She wiped away her tears and gave me a sly smile. "This princess won't say, unless..." A sudden sense of foreboding struck me. "Unless what? Take me there one more time." "No way." "Fine," she said with hands on her hips. "Then I'll go tell father that the young mistress of the general's mansion took me to visit a brothel." "My dear lady," I put on a pitiful face. "Then, this time, let Charles Smith secretly bring guards to follow us. Don't worry. His men's mouths are absolutely sealed." "Deal." After Karina left, Charles Smith accompanied me to the Marquis's residence. After the servants announced our arrival, Vincent hurried out to greet us. Upon seeing Charles Smith by my side, he paused momentarily and slowed his steps. After exchanging greetings, Vincent finally turned his gaze to me. "Is Lady Xia unharmed?" I shook my head. "It's nothing, thanks to the young Marquis's timely rescue that day. Otherwise, I'm afraid my life would have been lost there long ago." Vincent smiled. "Madam Smith once saved me in the past. Consider that day as repaying the favor." As he spoke, he looked at me with a smile, then lightly averted his gaze when his words trailed off. Vincent was extremely well-mannered. Even someone as straightforward as Karina could see his affection for me, yet he always restrained himself, never overstepping boundaries in words or actions. He is truly a gentleman of noble character. Like cutting, like filing, like carving, like polishing, in the midst of the heavy atmosphere, Charles Smith took my hand and whispered, "Thank you, young Marquis, for saving my wife. I've prepared this humble gift as a token of gratitude. Please do not disdain it." neither the Marquis's residence nor the General's household lacked such gifts, so Vincent did not refuse. He merely nodded slightly and expressed his thanks. The gaze swept over the handshake between Charles Smith and me. Light as if weightless, he chuckled softly, then he watched as Charles Smith led me away. The carriage slowly departed from the Marquis's residence, a sudden gust of wind lifting the curtain, faintly revealing the slender figure still standing at the entrance. The sleeves flutter gracefully, like a sturdy green pine, silently standing guard, never stepping forward. By the time we returned to the mansion, the sky had darkened. Charles Smith took a deep breath. This time it should be fine, right? What can I do? The person leaned in and whispered 2 words in my ear. My ears instantly turned crimson. I kicked at the bend of his leg, only to have my ankle caught in his grasp. The warmth from his palm burned through the fabric. Before we even entered the courtyard, he swept me up in his arms and hurried inside. Charles Smith. I clutched his collar tightly. It's not even fully dark yet, MHM. His face was as calm as still water, yet his tone carried a hint of amusement. Let's make a fuss for a while, and soon it'll be dark. After months of self-restraint and propriety as the young mistress of the General's mansion, living like a widow, I finally slept with this fish. This fish was truly alluring. In the pitch-black night, he extinguished all the candles in the room. On the bed, forehead pressed against mine, he gently brushed his lips against mine in a kiss. After a mere taste, came that powerful and forceful possession. He pinned my wrists above my head, gently grazing my wrist bones with his fingers, a seemingly calm gesture that, in the midst of this enchanting night, took on the illusion of flirtation. I trembled in his embrace, as the enormous fishtail coiled around me, dragging me into the depths of desire, stirring wave after wave of passion. I can't help but think about the merman. The merman truly isn't human, that level of aggression. If I were a delicate noble lady, I'd probably have been broken apart by him long ago. Lost in thought, he forced me to turn my head, his tongue prying open my lips as his words came out muffled. Madam, you must focus on your work. I focused and focused, yet this person seemed never to tire. Round and round it went, wearing me down until I was half dead. At last, it's all over. I relaxed in his embrace, about to push him away and call for Kathy to fetch me some hot water to clean up, but he pulled me back again. Where are you going, my lady? I was taken aback, defensively placing my hands in front of me. Isn't it over? He smiled as he lowered his head to kiss me, his tone bewitching. My lady must have forgotten what I said that night. Mermaids, there's more than one. Pressed against the scorching heat, he chuckled. Bear with it, my lady, this is no merman, it's clearly a male donkey. No sooner had the complaint crossed my mind than Charles Smith gave my lips a firm but not too harsh bite, his movements suddenly intensifying. My lady seems to have forgotten that mermen can hear thoughts, he said. After half a night of exertion, I fell into a deep sleep. I slept until noon the next day, only to be awakened by Karina's knocking at the door. Josephine, this girl never acts like a princess should, always shouting my name in my courtyard without hesitation. Wake up. She pressed against the door crack, whispering in a hushed voice, you must take me out tonight. Startled, I quickly got out of bed and opened the door. You're really the death of me. Karina and I disguised ourselves as men again to enter the Spring Breeze Pavilion, only this time, Charles Smith accompanied us, with many of his hidden guards secretly watching over us. Everything went smoothly. The only minor mishap was, Karina felt a stirring of springtime desire in this pleasure house. The other party was what the madam recommended to us as so-called fresh goods, a beast folk with fox ears. They wore a plain white robe, their face as flawless as jade, with slightly elongated fox-like eyes that were deep and alluring. Karina nearly crushed my wrist bones as she stared intently at the fox beast man, whispering through gritted teeth, Josephine, it seems this princess has taken a fancy to him. Bearing the pain, I cautioned in a low voice, Your Highness, do not act rashly. No. She retorted softly, Today, this princess shall indulge in impulsiveness. With that, she directly pulled out silver notes and tossed them to the madam. That young man, I'll take him. The fox beast man has a pair of deep, alluring eyes, a docile posture of submission, he said, would go through fire and water for my master. Karina helped him up, met his gaze, but quickly averted her eyes. Do you have a name? No. He smiled gently at Karina, slightly bending down as he spoke to her, resting his hands on his knees and gazing into her eyes with a warm and reverent expression. Please, master, bestow a name upon me. Karina bit her lip in thought. Then, I shall call you Louis. Also, she tentatively reached out and touched his pure white fox ears. Don't call me master, Just, call me miss." He let her pinch and knead those ears as she pleased, his gaze calm and gentle, as if looking at a long-lost lover. Even an outsider like me could sense the indescribable tenderness between them. He smiled. "Thank you, miss, for bestowing a name." I quietly nudged Charles Smith beside me. Can you hear his thoughts? Only one sentence. Worried that Karina might be deceived, I hurriedly asked, "What is it?" Charles Smith lowered his voice and said slowly. All I could hear was a sigh in his heart. "Princess, long time no see, that's all the story." What do you think of this story? Share with me in the comments section. What would you do if you were in this situation? Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.